so we returned to public session. We were actually in an executive session to discuss an issue related to the teacher's contract, and we returned to public session. Our first order of business in public session is public input, and seeing nobody out there except for people who are on the agenda, we will go to our second item, which is student report, and tonight we have Sarah Murray.
Hello.
Hi.
So elections for school committee at the high school is coming up, and myself and Marina Galato, we will be here next year because of our 2-year term. Since this is our first year, we'll be here next year. My brother Jonathan will be running again since his term is up, and we're looking for a new member at large and class of 2013. And for sports at the high school, the boys lacrosse team is now in the state tournament, and the girls lacrosse team is having their game right now, their state qualifier game on the turf field, under the lights and everything, and it's a really big game and a lot of people are going. Senior prom is next week, June 7th at the Crown Plaza in Danvers, and junior prom was May 14th, and from what I've heard, it was a big success and it was really fun. 243 people went, and everyone looked really nice. Senior exams are next week. The spring concert for band and chorus is this Thursday, the 27th, and last Thursday was spring recognition night. Sports awards for the spring are next Tuesday, June 1st at 7:30, and the variety show, the 70s themed variety show for chorus and maskers and all these different performances is next week on June 3rd at 7:30, and tickets are $5, and it's going to be a really good show. It's really funny and awesome in 70s, which is
A long time ago, 70s.
yeah. And
70s, Chuck.
Can't hear me. Talking about old people?
Yeah.
Relative 70s.
That was.
yeah, the graduation for the class of 2010 is on June 11th, and the Ultimate Frisbee team won their game against Lexington on the turf field. The blood drive was on Friday, and it was sponsored by the National Honor Society. And Relay for Life is next Friday, June 4th, and it goes from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Saturday. And for my student work, basically I'm in the chorus class and I'm in the variety show, and we've been working really hard, like practicing our dances and singing our songs, and we practice during class, we can go during power block, there's rehearsals after school, and it's like a lot of work, but it's going to be worth it because it's going to look really good.
Awesome.
So that's what I've been working on, just dancing my butt off. Yeah,
Thanks, Sarah.
that's what I have.
Did you say graduation is June 11th?
Yeah.
We have
Isn't
to
it usually the
attend,
first
Jerry.
Friday? Huh?
We have to go.
I
You
thought it was the
remember.
first Friday. of June.
No, because we get out later this year. Remember
The
that
school started late.
The school
and,
committee last year decided to start school late.
Okay.
Remember those people who were on the committee
Jeez,
last
I've
year?
been sitting down there June 4th. But
Yeah, but now, remember the old superintendent wanted to start school before Labor Day? Yeah. Any other questions for Sarah?
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
See you next
If we don't see you, have a great summer.
Thank you.
On her way to the trust.
Yep. Okay, next, we have an exciting item on our agenda. We're going to see the PowerPoint presentation at the secondary school
Mr.
building.
Chairman, can we hold off on that because, I hear you.
Oh,
Our PowerPoint presenters at
our
Little League.
PowerPoint presenters.
Is at Little League.
We're very excited about the presentation, but we will hold off until they all get here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. As soon as they get here, we'll just bring you onto the agenda.
I have an interest in one of your other things on here.
All right.
But that's old business, so you want to wait on that.
Okay. We're gonna probably pass over that stuff. But
Okay.
all right. Let's go to continued business then. We have approval of the fiscal year 11 recommended budget. Mr. Nelson or Dr. Mandel?
Sure. What I'd like to do is, if I may, Mr. Chairman, expand the discussion a little bit and share with the committee some of the financial activities that are underway now. And to give you a sense for what the business office is involved with now, presently we're literally dealing with the FY09 budget of all budgets because we're undergoing our annual audit of our end-of-the-year report. And of course, as the committee knows, the selectmen select a private auditor to come into our office, generally sometime during the month of May, and audit the previous year. So there will be an audit report coming out probably in June or July by that committee. So we're very much involved of all things in FY09. As you also know, we're in the middle of the fourth quarter of FY10, and a primary activity at this point is to manage the budget down as close to zero as we can. And this has some implications for FY11 and 12. That's why I thought it was an appropriate topic. When we create a budget, we have certain expectations for how much we're going to need for legal services, for teachers, for materials, things of that nature. And towards the end of the year, we begin to, we're reviewing things all the time, but towards the end of the year, we're reviewing with a higher level of specificity as to do we need that much money in this account? Because if we don't, let's see if we can reallocate those funds to another purpose. We can say this very publicly because the town officials are aware of the fact that it's our intention, as much as we can, not to return any money after our appropriation. I think that they encourage us to do that. So we can talk about it. This budget process is very transparent, and so we're very much engaged in that now. And there are certain budget lines that you have to hold on to towards the end of the year because you don't really know what's going to happen. You can always project out most of your salaries through June, but you don't always know if there's going to be a unilateral placement with a special ed student going out to a private setting. You don't always know about legal services. So it's around this point in time, mid-May, where we start to say, gee, we don't need that amount of funds in that line. The winter wasn't mild, but it was slightly below average in terms of degree days, so we can start to reallocate money. And the good news here is that's what we're engaged in. And generally what we try to do is provide additional funds to the school principals to do pre-purchasing for the following school year. That's particularly poignant now that we have cut their budget so much. Because remember, we level funded them and they had a 5% decrease from FY09 into 10. But in addition to that 5% decrease, we have made other cuts. If you recall the recap sheet that we used to balance the FY11 budget, we removed
It was 40,000.
yes, $40,000 more from their budgets, and then $20,000 more from instructional technology, so really 60. So you're getting close to it, but an 8% decrease over the last 2 years. So that's one of the focus areas, is to try to provide them a little bit of a head start on their purchasing so that that 8% decrease won't be as palpable for them. But there's another area that we're looking at too, and Dr. Mandeville and I have been talking about this. You know, even though we're engaged in FY09 audit, we're closing FY10, we're getting close to beginning FY11. We're also, I'm very conscious about FY12 now. And for several years, that's been the year I've worried about most because FY09 and 10, we received a lot of ARRA money to replace the funds that normally we would expect from state and local sources. You know, when you look at the formulas that underpinned the ARRA money, it really was that. The dollars that North Reading and all the community received were dollars that you would have probably normally received either from your Chapter 7 state sources or from your local aid, you know, through your property taxes and all of that. So our present expectation is that we will not be receiving any ARRA money in FY12. And the hope is that the economy rebounds to replace those dollars, which, you know, amount to close to $1 million. So, call me crazy, but FY12 is on my mind these days. So the other thing we're trying to do now is, as we identify dollars that are not needed in the present budget lines, there are some creative and very appropriate legal things we can do to potentially help 12, and it involves revolving accounts. And to give you a perfect example, as you know, we have a circuit breaker, which in effect acts like a revolving account. It's an account that doesn't close out at the end of the year. And circuit breaker is used for special education. So if we have, if I can use an example, if we have $10,000 that hasn't been used for utilities, we can appropriately and legally transfer that so that instead of expending money on utilities, perhaps what we would do is expend that same $10,000 for special ed tuitions in the month of June. That $10,000 in effect saves money that normally would have come out of the circuit breaker. So another way of saying all this is, if there were expectations of expending out of circuit breaker and other revolving funds in the last quarter of FY10, and we have money in the general fund instead, what we can do is expend the funds out of our general fund, being the account appropriation, thereby increasing the end-of-year balances for revolving funds and circuit breaker.
And that's the only ones we can carry over, right, those funds?
Yes, exactly. So that's the key point, is the general fund, which is the town appropriation, you don't carry forward anything. So it's in your best interest to expend it appropriately. I don't want anyone to have the impression that we're not expending dollars at the end of the year appropriately. So we're really very much engaged in that now, and by raising the balances of the revolving funds, it allows us potentially either a shock absorber for unforeseen problems in FY11, or hopefully a little bit of a head start for FY12. So it's kind of a tedious process, and you're having to anticipate a lot of things all over the place, but I wanted to mention that so the committee was aware of some of our activities. And frankly, also, we generally try to spend down our revolving funds because there shouldn't be large balances in them. Those are all for specific purposes. So if we are successful in doing this, we may see some higher balances than normal in our revolving funds, but it's being done intentionally for a purpose. And I know that oftentimes the Finance Committee will look at our balances and wonder why you're ending the year with a sum there, why didn't you expend it? But we really use that as a shock absorber. And my last point in this regard is to talk a little bit more about the circuit breaker. The committee may recall that there have been discussions about the creation of a special ed revolving fund from time to time, so as to act as that shock absorber for unforeseen special ed expenses. But in effect, we already have that fund in place. The circuit breaker fund, in effect, is exactly that. We have the ability, properly and legally, to either expend out of circuit breaker or not expend out of circuit breaker. And since those funds carry over, we very much actively use that circuit breaker for that purpose. So you may recall there's been discussions about creating another fund, which I certainly defer to the committee on their views about that, but we already really have such a fund in place that's functioning under our control and without the need of a town meeting appropriation to do so. So that's just a little background on what we're involved with now. As to the agenda item FY11, we, I believe, at the last meeting did distribute a recap of where we are. I have extra copies if you want to review it again. Okay, nothing has changed since then, but.
So we can have minutes.
I would draw your attention to the bottom number, the town meeting appropriation. That number at the bottom, $23,143,886, represents a 1.5% increase over the present year. And that is the number that has been agreed to and will be printed in the town meeting warrant, which is at the print shop. So that is the number that we have backed into, because that's, frankly, we did back into that number. And the detail above shows how we did that backfill. The reductions, those 10 reductions, are meant to be a way to itemize the changes we made from level services. We distributed a preliminary budget to the committee in early January. That level services budget, as you see at the top, was $23,698,000. So because we had to go from $23,698,000 down to $23,143,000,